Maybe he'll love me now. That's kind of the sad part of the story, but Reuben was their firstborn. And as such, as the firstborn, would have had a great, great privilege. We see that when we read what Jacob was saying in Genesis chapter 49. Remember how he spoke about his son. He called him my firstborn, my might, the beginning of my strength, and the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. We think about that word excellency, right, as like this, almost this regal term, right? When you would bow before royalty, or you would say, Your Excellency. That is a term that you use in honor and respect and reverence to someone when you refer to them as Your Excellency. But that's how Jacob said Reuben was supposed to be, right? The firstborn, the beginning of his might. What a privilege to be the firstborn. Under the days of the patriarchs, before there was a Mosaic law, before there was a system of priesthood and those kind of different things. I mean, I think it seems pretty clear from the patriarchal history that the firstborn was viewed as the next leader, the leader of the family, the one who would take up the reins after the father, the one that would become first in the family. That was what Reuben would have been in line for. Turn to Deuteronomy chapter 21. I'll show you something else here. Again, we're just talking about Reuben's potential, what he could have had, what he should have had, as he was the firstborn. Jacob referred to him as his excellency. Surely the one that would take up the reins, surely the one that was in line for great blessing. Deuteronomy chapter 21. Deuteronomy 21, and let's start at verse 15. Now, as I read this story, tell me if a family doesn't come to your mind. Deuteronomy 21, verse 15. If a man have 2 wives, do we know anybody from our story yet this morning that has 2 wives? Well, Jacob did, right? Okay. Let's just read verse 15. If a man have 2 wives, one beloved and another hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn, by giving him a double portion of all that he hath, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. Isn't that an interesting phrase? The beginning of my strength? Where did that come from? This situation isn't actually pulled out of thin air, is it? This was something that was relevant in the very history of Israel. Jacob had a couple of wives, and when the Bible sets up this system of comparison, it pictures that you've got one wife that's the beloved and one wife that is the hated. And obviously that's not talking about a despising of the one, but it's that system of comparison, right? Where it's obvious that in this family you have one wife that's loved more than the other one is. They have sons, okay? Now, I read the story about Jacob, and Reuben is the firstborn, and I say, man, he has great potential. He's first in line. He should get the blessings that go with being the firstborn. And the question that comes into our mind is, yeah, but what about Joseph? Because Joseph was the son of Rachel. Joseph was the son that he loved more than all of the others. That doesn't change the fact that Reuben was still in line and would have received the blessing. He actually goes later in the law to make sure that actually gets written down to make sure that it happens that way, right? Picture this. It's not hard to picture it. It's in the Bible. Man has 2 wives. They give him children. He's not supposed to take the son of the loved wife and give him all the privileges and blessings if he's not indeed the firstborn. But he's supposed to acknowledge him according to verse number 17. By giving him a double portion of all that he hath, he's the beginning of his strength, the right of the firstborn is his. So much there, right? So much potential for a guy like Reuben. Maybe we look at the story and we would look at it and say, I think, Joseph was the favorite. Joseph got the coat of many colors. Joseph was the son of Rachel. And all of those things are true. And guess what? I'm sure that Jacob loved Joseph more than he loved Reuben. But when he comes to the end of his life, Jacob does recognize, this was my firstborn. The excellency of power, the excellency of dignity. He was in line to be first. He was in line to inherit all of those blessings. Okay? What a blessing to be the firstborn under that kind of patriarchal system, right? Reuben had so much potential when he was born and as he lived as the firstborn son of Jacob. Now let's go to our text. Genesis chapter 49. I give you all of that to show you the potential that was in Reuben. But number 2, let's talk about Reuben unstable. Reuben unstable. All of those things from verse 3 were true. And maybe you get the picture in your mind as you read through verse 3 that Jacob's starting to get flashbacks of that young boy that, after he was born and he's running around out in the yard and he's helping dad out in the field and he's, all of these things kind of start to come back to his mind. But then when verse 4 starts, you see other things that start to come back to Jacob's mind. Genesis 49 and verse number 4, unstable as water. Reuben wasn't very reliable, right? Reuben wasn't what you would consider stable or consistent or faithful or reliable. Now, there's some things in the scripture, if we could just take a few minutes to walk through these. Let's talk about Reuben from that perspective as well. In Genesis chapter 37, we won't read everything here. I think everybody's pretty familiar with the story. Joseph's got the coat of many colors. His brothers hate him for that. Now, that's not the only reason. Joseph was, he could be a jerk about it sometimes too, right? Just in his attitude that he had. At least, maybe it seems that way. He didn't mind rubbing in his brother's face as the dreams that he had and, all of his future goals and aspirations. And the brothers hated that, right? They viewed him as the little brother, the pipsqueak, and now he's got these delusions of grandeur that ultimately actually come true. So let's jump down to verse number 20. We're familiar with the story where they decide they're going to get rid of him. Let's just start actually with verse number 18. Genesis 37:18. When they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Brotherly love, right? Joseph has aggravated them to the point that they want to kill him. That leads you to believe that it had gotten to them to a very, very rough point. Verse 19, and they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and he said, let us not kill him. Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. Now, this is where you see the conflicting part, right, in Reuben, this instability, this lack of consistency. Reuben doesn't want to see his brother killed, right? He does not want to see his brother slain, okay? There at least seems to be something there to applaud him for, to congratulate him for. Reuben doesn't want to go along with the plan to just kill him and then we'll figure out how to tell Dad later. But he says, here's what we'll do. Let's cast him into the pit, and we'll teach him a lesson here. And what was Reuben's intent the whole time? End of verse 22. That he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. We learn that Reuben's kind of thinking the whole time, okay, we'll cast him into the pit and we'll leave him there for dead. Knowing all along, Reuben has a plan to really go back later and make it right. Reuben's going to eventually backtrack, circle back, get him out of the pit, deliver him to his father again. You could be the big brother and just, put the axe to the whole plan. Like, guys, we're not going to kill our brother. We're not going to lay hands on our brother. Yes, he's annoying, and yes, we hate hearing about his dreams, and yes, it's getting to the point where it seems like it's ridiculous. But there has to be somewhere between annoying brother and let's kill him, right? There has to be somewhere there where there's actually a reasonable response to Joseph. So Reuben, he steps in to make sure that he's not killed, but he also doesn't seem to kind of want to go against the rest of his brothers completely because he wants to satisfy them and their bloodthirstiness or their lust for revenge. And so, let's just cast him into the pit. Basically, we'll leave him there for dead. We won't kill him, but we'll just put him in the pit, and then maybe whatever happens to him happens. And then I'll go back and get him later, deliver him to dad, and I'll look like the good guy. And all of this stuff, right? Conflict, right? This should have ended there, right? Somebody should have been the voice of reason and spoke up and said, guys, listen, there has to be something to do besides kill our brother. Jump down to Genesis 37, verse 29. Genesis 37, verse 29. Reuben returned into the pit. Behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. It seems like after they had thrown him down into the pit, and Reuben maybe goes his merry way, the brothers actually see the caravan that's passing by and decide that they're going to sell him off into slavery. Reuben comes back and finds the pit empty. Then he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? What am I going to do? Now, why would Reuben say that? Well, guess who's the one that's responsible? Guess who's the oldest? Guess who's the big brother here? Who's the one that really has to go back and answer to dad for what happened? Reality starts to set in on Reuben, and likely what he should have done in the first place. Now he's got to figure out how he answers to dad for what happened to Joseph. So verse 31, he opted against the honest approach. He doesn't plan to tell dad the truth. It says in verse 31 that they took Joseph's coat, they killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in the blood. And thus you learn the story they actually go back to Jacob with, which is he got eaten. He got mangled, he got tore, he's been destroyed. He's an evil beast has devoured him, verse 33. Reuben's a character, right? He knows he's responsible, and yet he can't get himself over the hump of coming clean and telling the truth. He realizes it's on him. What am I going to do? How am I going to explain this to dad? All right, Genesis chapter 42. Time passes. And we know the story that kind of goes in between, right? Joseph's in Egypt, and he's elevated and humbled and elevated again. And we learn that the brethren go down into Egypt to get some food. And at that first go down, they actually keep Simeon down in Egypt. And if you learn here from Genesis chapter 42, Reuben, after his brothers have been down to Egypt, they've lost Simeon as well. Genesis 42 and verse number 37. Reuben spake unto his father, saying, slay my two sons. If I bring him not to thee, deliver him to my hand, and I will bring him to thee again. They need to go and they need to get more food, right? They need to go eventually down to get more food again. Jacob, when he learns that he's been bereaved of Joseph, and now he's lost Simeon as well, he looks at Reuben, and he says in verse 38, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way which ye go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. They're supposed to go back down, and before they can get any more food again, they actually have to bring their brother Benjamin back. You remember that story that they actually come clean with Joseph? They don't know it's him yet, but they admit, hey, we're all the son of one man, and there's 12 of us. Well, there's 10 of us here, right? We had a brother that's dead, and we have a brother that's back home. And Joseph is actually demanding before they can come back, they have to bring little Benjamin with them. Jacob's like, no, that's not happening. Jacob says, nope, I'm not sending. You've already lost Joseph. Verse number 35, or in verse 36, he says, me have you bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, Simeon is not, and you'll take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. No, we're done. We're done here. You've already lost Joseph. You've already lost Simeon. I'm not letting you take Benjamin down there. And this is where Reuben comes in, right? In verse 37, Dad, I promise. This is Reuben saying, Dad, I promise I will take care of him. Slay my 2 sons, if I bring him not to thee. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him to thee again. Right? Reuben goes to his father and says, Dad, you can trust me. And if something happens, you can take my sons. But Dad, I promise you can trust me. I'll make this right. I'll go down. I'll take Benjamin down, but I'll bring everybody back. It'll work out. It'll be just fine. And what does Jacob say? My son shall not go with you, for his brother is dead. He is left alone. Reuben, the last 2 times I have left you in charge, I've ended up with 1 dead son, and now 1 that's left in captivity, left behind in Egypt. And though Reuben goes to his dad and pleads with him, Dad, you can trust me. I'll take care of this. Jacob says, no. And Jacob would rather lose Simeon down in Egypt for the rest of his life than risk anything happening to Benjamin. And he is not going to trust Reuben to do this. It is only in chapters 43 and 44 when things get so desperate and Judah begins to plead on their behalf that Jacob allows them to go. But when Reuben presents the idea, Jacob says no. Jacob doesn't trust Reuben any longer. It's kind of sad, right? The firstborn, this guy that, was in line, the excellency of dignity, the excellency of power, the beginning of my might. And now he can't trust him. The last couple times he's trusted him, hasn't gone great. And then there's one more event. In our text in Genesis 49, it says in verse 4, unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed. Then defilest thou it. He went up to my couch. Now that is a reference to a story that happens in Genesis chapter 35. It's not actually a story. The Bible doesn't give us graphic details about it. It almost just kind of passes by. It tells you what happened, and then it moves on. But it's a significant event because of what Reuben did. Genesis chapter 35. Genesis chapter 35. What you have here is a listing of the names and who belonged to which mom. But in Genesis 35, look at verse 22. Genesis 35, verse 22. It came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard it. See how that just kind of passes by? It mentions that. But Reuben actually had an adulterous affair with one of his father's concubines or wives. Remember that Jacob had 2 wives, Leah and Rachel. He also had children with their concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah. You actually see here in verse 25, the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan and Naphtali. So Jacob actually had sons by 4 different women, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Bilhah, according to this here in verse number 22, at one point Reuben went to her and had an adulterous affair with her. And that actually became, it sounds like from Genesis 49, the straw that broke the camel's back, figuratively, right? That after that point, Reuben had lost all trust. Jacob had lost all confidence and trust in Reuben. How's Reuben ever going to lead this family after that, right? You realize from verse number 25 that two of Reuben's brothers, their mother is Bilhah, the one that he had an affair with. Like, how's he ever going to lead this family? Like, there's like scandal now included. And you get to the end, and when Jacob speaks about Reuben, he's like, son, my firstborn, my might, the excellency of the family, the excellency of dignity and of power. So unstable, though, unreliable and inconsistent, thou shalt not excel. So though he was intended to be the excellency, he would not excel. Because he says there in Genesis 49, the way it's worded, thou wentest up to thy father's bed, then defilest thou it. He went up to my couch. He actually broke any remaining trust or confidence that would have been left. Now, just as Deuteronomy 21 references some of these events, actually what Reuben did ultimately becomes a law in the nation of Israel as well. You turn over later to Leviticus chapter 18, verse 8, and it speaks there specifically about uncovering the nakedness of thy father. Let me just read it real quick. We've got a second. Leviticus 18. Leviticus 18, verse 8. The nakedness of thy father's wife thou shalt not uncover. It is thy father's nakedness. That's actually something that Reuben had done. In having an affair with Bilhah, he had broken something that would ultimately become a law in the nation of Israel, that they were prohibited from doing. So with Reuben, it's just this weird, conflicting. Here's a guy that was the firstborn, the leader. Was he conflicted at times? Yeah. It seemed like he tried to play both ends when it came to his brother, and killing him's a little much, guys. Or at least he felt that way, even if he didn't say it as much. And he had plans. Sometimes that's what it seems like, right? With inconsistency. There's like maybe good intentions or maybe good plans, but there just wasn't a follow through. And it just seems that every time a story gets broken down to the nuts and bolts, Reuben's just, he just doesn't have it. He's just not reliable. He's just not consistently faithful. So this event, if you turn over to 1 Chronicles chapter 5, you remember what I read to you from Deuteronomy, that Joseph being the son of Rachel, the loved wife, did not mean that Joseph was in line to inherit all of the blessings. Reuben was still in line to inherit those things. That is not why Reuben lost his point of privilege. It's not because he was Leah's son. It's not because he wasn't Dad's favorite. It's because he lost those privileges. 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 1, now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, listen to this, for he was the firstborn, but for as much as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, and the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. We've talked about that before, right? Remember where Deuteronomy spoke about a double portion? That was Reuben's right to inherit. He lost that. Not because he wasn't the favorite. Not because he wasn't the son of Leah. He lost it because of his actions. He lost it because of what he had done. Joseph is actually the one that inherited the double portion. Remember, we don't speak about the tribe of Joseph. We speak about the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. They were the sons of Joseph. Ephraim and Manasseh were not Jacob's sons. They were Joseph's sons. Joseph became two tribes, not just one. So he inherited the double blessing. He inherited the double portion, and Reuben lost it because of his actions, because he wasn't stable, because he wasn't faithful. Now, thirdly and lastly, let's talk about Reuben excelling. There's much in the scripture, right? There's much reason in the Bible that we have to be consistent, to be reliable, being faithful. Now, the Bible presents that from both the positive and the negative aspect, right? From the negative aspect, the Bible warns us about being inconsistent or being unreliable, being unfaithful. There's one that's just picturesque, right? Where the Bible says confidence in an unfaithful man when you need it is like what? It's like a broken tooth or a foot that's out of joint. Man, if you put confidence in someone that's not reliable, you might slide by, but when you really need him, that's when you're going to find, I mean, it's just like a toothache. That is like a lingering pain that is always continually sitting there and nagging at you and bothering you. A foot out of joint, you know, right? You can't put any weight on it, you know, and so if you can't put any weight on it, that affects everything else. You got to go slowly. You got to lean more upon your other leg. You got to, all of those things. If you're inconsistent, if you're unfaithful, the Bible gives great warning. Don't trust, you know. If someone has shown themselves to be unfaithful and unreliable, don't trust them, right? Don't put confidence in them. And on the flip side, that's the negative side about it. The positive side are the positive encouragements to be steadfast, to be reliable, to be consistent. You know, verses like 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse number 58, where he says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as ye know that your labor is not in vain." In the book of Titus, in chapter number 2, this is something he mentions to both Timothy and to Titus. Seems something he wanted these younger preachers to grasp and to get a hold of. But Titus chapter 2 in verse number 7, "In all things show thyself a pattern of good works. In doctrine showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity, sound speech that cannot be condemned." He encourages Titus to develop this pattern of consistency or this pattern of good works and a speech and a doctrine that is reliable and consistent to the point that it could not be condemned, right? And that he that is of the contrary part may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say to you, right? You live in such a way that if someone wanted to say something contrary about you, you live in such a way that if someone wanted to say, you know what, nope, so-and-so, they're unreliable, so-and-so's unfaithful, they're inconsistent. No, you display it, you live it so that they can't say those kind of things about you. It's sprinkled out throughout these other places as well. You know, James mentions twice about a man that's double-minded. You know, at different points in the letter of James, at one point he speaks about things that you ask for in faith, nothing wavering. And then another part, he talks about things that you ask when you're asking amiss, you're asking that you may consume it upon your lusts. And a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. He speaks in the same book about purifying your hearts, you double-minded. Right? There has to be this solidness, this consistency. It's encouraged and led to in the scripture. So when I read those verses, and again, Reuben came to mind later when I was thinking about and going back and thinking on our yea should be yea, our nay should be nay, right? This needless swearing that was mentioned in the book of James, swearing by heaven and earth and things, just be consistent, right? Be reliable, be truthful, be faithful, be someone whose word could be trusted and counted upon. The Bible puts a very, very high premium on trustworthiness and confidence in those kind of things. And Reuben was the example that came to mind, because here is a guy that had such great potential. All of these things, Jacob says, that he could have been, and all of these things that he should have been, You look at Reuben's life, though, and it just seemed like time after time, like, why can't this guy get over the hump? Why can't he, maybe he was well-meaning here, maybe he had good intentions here. And I bet when he went to his father and said, Dad, you can trust me, Reuben probably would have said anything and meant it. Dad, I'm going to give this my best shot. I won't lose them. But by that point, Dad was just like, son, I can't trust you. And we don't want to be that way, right? We want to be folks that are, the Lord, that others can have confidence in, right? That we're not just well-meaning and we don't just have good intentions, but, we're people that will follow through. We are folks that when we give our word, when we put our testimony or our reputation to something, it's solid, right? It's gold. So God help us to model faithful patterns of consistency and reliability, and let that be part of our character, right? That we are people that folks can have confidence in. Confidence always to do the right thing. All right, let's pray. God, we're thankful to come this morning. Thankful for the blessing of your word. Thankful